All right, welcome everyone to today's episode of Is It Prophecy here on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva. And the show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. Tell your friends and family to do the same thing. The more subscriptions I receive from my YouTube channel, the higher I will be in the YouTube ranking and more people will find out about this program. And of course, you can email me, messiahhour@gmail.com. What is the latest regarding the women's right to give a get and who has control over that whole situation? On the line right now to tell us about that is writer, commentator, and former correspondent for several Israeli news organizations, Ze'ev Ben Yechiel. Ze'ev, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Absolutely. Now, there are a lot of women out there who are in a tough situation where they want to get a divorce, but they are not able to do so. So before we go into the political details, can you tell us a bit about the religious halacha of that situation? Because many people out there listening, they're not Jewish, or they may be not so observant. They may not know the Jewish law about that. So please tell us.
Sure. So a lot of the halacha, the Jewish law, as regards to marriage, is based on a characteristically laconic opening in the tractate Kedushin, which says in Aramaic, Isha niknet b'shlosha. Sorry, in Hebrew, it's a thing from the Mishnah, Isha niknet b'shlosha, which means that a woman is literally translated acquired in three means. And basically the rabbis have interpreted this to mean that it's the woman who is quote-unquote acquired for marriage by the man, and therefore it is only the man who can unacquire the woman through the process of a get, a Jewish writ of divorce. In other words, the woman cannot unilaterally divorce her husband. He has to agree to it, whereas a man can divorce his wife without her consent, although there are also some rabbinical proceedings that are enacted in that case to safeguard the wife, so that give her the chance to say no when the husband wants to divorce her. And there are actually, in Israel, more cases now, this is last I heard, more cases of women who refuse to give their husbands a divorce, but the law is slanted towards the husband. Right. At least that's the way that the message has been propagated, by a lot of rather angry people.
Okay, before we talk about the angry people and why they might interpret this way, I just want to clarify for the audience why this can be so problematic, because if a woman wants a divorce and a man does not give her a divorce in the Jewish world, she can't remarry, correct? That's
correct. Strictly speaking, a man can get a rabbinical dispensation that basically frees him from the restriction on marrying another woman, whereas a woman can't do that. And this is another asymmetry that arouses a lot of protests in the religious world, particularly among women, of course, particularly among women who've had experiences trying to divorce their husbands. And one case that's become pretty well known in the media is that of a woman by the name of Rivki, whose husband, according to her testimony, has abused her for years, and he won't give her a get. And it's come out in the last couple of days that in recent court proceedings he actually chuckled as she was with tears in her eyes telling the court the things that were going on. So it's cases like these that really prompt a lot of people to words of anger, and that prompt a lot of calls for change in the very halacha, if not at least changes in the rabbinical court system in Israel, if not the actual halacha that determines the way that the religious courts in Israel rule. As we know, of course, the religious courts in Israel do have legal binding civil jurisdiction over marriages. One of the areas in which they, in fact, the area where perhaps they have the most legal civil influence in Israel.
And something I also want to point out to the audience, if a woman is in the situation where she is not getting a get from her husband, let's say she doesn't remarry, but she has a relationship with another man, they have a child, that child is a status of a mamzer, and tell us why that is such a serious situation.
Well, a mamzer, of course, is someone that cannot marry into anyone in the nation of Israel other than another mamzer. The definition of a mamzer is the child of a prohibited marriage, specifically with between a man and a woman who's still legally halakhically married to another man. There may be other cases. I honestly don't remember what those might be. But that's the major concern here. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, if there be one from incest, for example, like a brother or sister would have relations, have a child, that'd be another one. Because anything that's an asur relationship that produces a child, that's considered a mamzer, which is the literal translation means bastard, but what it really means is that it's a group of people that can only marry other mamzerim. So now, what I want to talk about, now that we have this established, why it's so serious, I want to talk about, you said, the halacha being changed. Is that possible? Because we have an idea that we don't change halacha, that we keep it the same, we don't have anyone big enough to do that. So is there a way that we could do that, though?
Well, as I wrote in a conversation to someone who's calling for change, to change the system would require essentially the overturning of at least 1,500 years of consistent halakhic jurisdiction that upholds this the current situation. I say at least because one can assume that the Talmud that was written about recorded 1,500 years ago is comprised of rulings that have been passed down for generations before that, and that reflects that itself reflects a status quo in the way that rulings are handled. So it's not a minor change, and it's not the kind of change that's ever really been undertaken within the last 1,000 years, at least nothing on this scale. The last change of note has been the ban on polygamy implemented by Rabbeinu Gershom about 1,000 years ago in Europe that applied to Ashkenazi Jews, and even so, that ban really in effect for the Mizrahi and Sephardi communities from North Africa and the Middle East. So we're talking about something that really would be represent a sea change in the way that the rabbinical leadership views rabbinical, just the clergy as well as the state-employed clergy in the rabbinate in Israel, the way that they operate, because change of this magnitude and profundity hasn't really been undertaken in recent memory.
Again, this is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Root Sheva. The show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're continuing the conversation with Ze'ev Ben Yechiel. Now, Ze'ev, you mentioned Rabbi Gershom's ban on polygamy. And for those who don't know, at one point Jewish men, believe it or not, were allowed to marry multiple wives, and many did so, and that did occur in the Bible with Abraham and Jacob. And Rabbi Gershom came and changed it, and we follow that pretty much till this day. So the question many people might be asking, if that was done, even though it was 1,500 years ago, what have you, could it therefore be done now? Because Rabbi Gershom looked at the landscape, he said we have to have a change. Could someone now look at the landscape and say we have a change, and could actual change occur?
Well, his ban came into effect at a time when the vast majority of Jews, especially in his part of the world, were already monogamous, and so I think that's one of the reasons why that change didn't stir up more controversy and didn't embitter the relationships between the rabbinical leadership and among people, among the Jewish people living there. Today, the entrenchment of halacha and I guess what some people call the ossification, the fossilization of Jewish law has reached a point where these kinds of things are just hard to do. I am not sure that there would be much more opposition to such a ruling than there was to Rabbeinu Gershom's ruling 1,000 years ago, but like I said, right now, because of the way that the system is, it's very hard to make these kinds of changes. I have heard from multiple people the criticism that essentially the rabbinical leadership, or the way that the Jewish nation and its religious leadership relates to Jewish law is basically the same way that the Sadducees in the time of the Second Temple related to Jewish law, which is to say extremely literalist, particularist, and very closed to flexibility and change.
No, but isn't that a bad thing? I mean, didn't they do something that wasn't really good overall? And isn't that the situation we're in now, where you're taking something literal and it's not good for the overall public? Again, we have a situation. I'm not saying all cases are like this, obviously, but you have a situation where there's a man laughing in court when they're talking about his abuse of his wife, and the way things are, she couldn't really she couldn't get a get from the husband unless he agrees to it. We'll talk a little bit more about how that's done. But the fact of the matter is that isn't that a problem if we're doing it that way? We're taking it too literally? Or is it not?
Certainly. I'm not sure literal would be the word to apply to all cases. I think there are definitely some laws that continue to be applied well beyond their period of relevance, applicability, or benefit, because the law is being applied very literally. I suppose what I mean is just a strict sort of fundamentalist adherence to existing statutes, regardless of current conditions. And the thing that's enabled the Torah to survive as a faith, as a practice that's united the Jewish people against all historical odds for thousands of years, is the very flexibility of the Torah that, ironically, it's on the surface stems from the endurance, the durability of certain basic Torah guidelines that set the boundaries for jurisprudence one way or the other, for the derivation of laws, the deciding of cases, legislation, jurisprudence that say this is as far as we can draw the line to the left, this is as far as we can draw the line to the right, and anywhere in between there we have room to play with. And of course, what defines those limits is also under discussion, but in general, there's some kind of fuzzy, agreed upon normative framework within which we can call halakhic decisions orthodox ones. And perhaps the question is whether that framework itself needs to be adjusted a little bit. But I think that on certain things that are often the most controversial ones, the part of the reason for the indignation of so many people is that there can be change made that would still preserve the basic principles and the guiding framework of halakha.
Again, this is It Prophecy on Israel National Radio, Arut Sheva, and the show is syndicated as the Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube and type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're continuing the conversation with Ze'ev Ben Yechiel. Ze'ev, tell our audience the influence or the power of the rabbinical court on Israeli law and Israeli society, because a lot of people are confused in terms of how that occurred, because people think of Israel, secular government took it over, Ben Gurion, Herzl, you have a lot of secular leadership, and in most of the country is secular, meaning they're not Shomer Shabbat when I say that, but the courts have a power, the religious courts do. So tell us a bit about their influence and why it's set up that way.
Well, I don't know if there's a single person in the state of Israel who's entirely clear on how much power the rabbinical court should have, and how much power the law says they should have. The question is how much power they have. What we can look at today is how much power they de facto have, in fact. The role of the rabbinical courts in public rulings in Israel derives largely from a compromise struck between the so-called secular founders of the state, although there are some religious people among them. The majority were not Orthodox observant Jews, and the Orthodox rabbinical leadership. So, let's say one compromise is that anyone with at least one Jewish grandparent is eligible to make Aliyah, to move to Israel, could be granted automatic citizenship based on the law of return that was passed in 1950 or 1951. And another example is the establishment of a state rabbinical authority for the validation of kosher certificates, kashrut certificates. And questions such as the running of public buses on Shabbat tend to be thornier, and oftentimes we have decisions that vary from local jurisdiction to one local jurisdiction to another, such as in Jerusalem, where the Egged public bus cooperative that runs the buses in the city is shut down on Shabbat, as well as with light rail. So public transport in Israel shut down Shabbat. On the other hand, you have buses running in Haifa and in Tel Aviv. You have companies that are allowed to operate. Also, the stores in Jerusalem and other cities in the country are technically supposed to be closed on Shabbat, but many business owners opt to pay the fine rather than lose that business for the day. Burial, Jewish burial, who can be buried in based on their Jewish status, is another cause for controversy, and the allotment of burial, I should say the construction projects that may contain the bones of deceased Jews is another issue that often the rabbinical leadership, maybe the non-state leadership, objects to and monitors things of that nature. There's another one that also comes to mind, which is El Al, which is the state airline, the state-funded subsidized airline that recently, well, it's been going on for a few years, the issue of whether or not a plane can fly on Shabbat in certain cases where the emergency circumstances, extenuating circumstances, and what happens in those cases. And oftentimes religious leadership in Israel gets up in a frenzy when an El Al plane is operating with passengers on Shabbat.
All right, now I want to deviate a little bit in the last few minutes before the break, because you talked about Shabbat observance. Now, I thank you for bringing that up as terms of why the stores are open. I've always wanted to know that. If anyone who's walked down Ben Yehuda on a Friday night sees a lot of bars open and stores, and you say that the reason why they have that open is they get fined, but they're willing to take the fine because of the business they get. Couldn't the government make the fine so large it wouldn't be worth their time? It would have stores closed on Shabbat the way most of the religious community would like it. Jerusalem is a very religious city, so is it possible that they could simply raise the fine?
Well, sure. They could do a whole variety of things. Be simpler just to take away their license and send in cops to close them down. I think the state is aware of the balancing act that it needs to maintain in order to prevent unrest and to keep the country running. There's a lot of religious tension in the country, and on top of all of its problems with its neighbors and the Arabs living in the West Bank and in Gaza. So, it's a problem that at the moment the government isn't willing to take a principal stance on by arresting people. And it's also not a problem by shutting down businesses. It's also not a problem that the government necessarily, all members of the government necessarily agree on. Israel is an extremely democratic democracy. A lot of people say that it's a little bit too democratic, and there's just too many parties and too many voices that share power in the Knesset and legislature. And there are a lot of people who think that stores should remain open on Shabbat in people in positions of power, and so they also wield that influence. So, it's a bit of a tug of war.
Okay, we're going to take a break. Before we do, I want to remind everyone that I'm on JApp. That's a Jewish application that has shiurim for big rabbis as well as episodes of this program. You can find JApp from their website, www.j-app.me, and you can download JApp from iTunes or Google Play stores, or again from the website, www.j-app.me. This show is syndicated as Messiah Hour on YouTube. Go to YouTube, type in Messiah Hour with Ari Louis, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free to do so. If you have any ideas, any topics you want me to cover in the future, or any interviews you want me to conduct, email me, messiahhour@gmail.com. We'll try to make that happen for you. We'll take a quick break and have more on the other side with Ze'ev Ben Yechiel. This is a Prophecy on IsraelNationalRadio.com.